What's going on? It's your boy, Connor Conflict, and in today's video, I am going over the top offensive players the Dolphins should or not even consider, but the top offensive players that the Dolphins could look to add. So I went position by position, and I just listed a couple of names of guys that could potentially fit some of the roles that we're looking for to add onto the roster. I will note in this video, just because of the depth in how I did it in terms of just listing a bunch of different names and how they could fit. I'm doing the offensive line in a whole separate video. As you guys know, it's a huge need, so I'm going to dedicate a sole video on the potential offensive linemen the Dolphins can look to add. So in today's videos, I go over quarterbacks, running backs, fullbacks, receivers, and tight ends. So without further ado, we'll hop right into backup quarterback because it seems very clear that Tua is going to be our starter. So I have 5 guys, all a little different, different stages of their career. So my top guy I want to see the Dolphins go after, and this, to be fair, it does depend on money because I don't want to go overpay for a backup quarterback, but you do want someone that if Tua were to go down, because he has had some injuries, that he'd be able to step up and not be a huge liability. So my top guy for the Dolphins would be fellow Hawaiian Marcus Mariota. I want to say similar to Tua's skill sets, but he's probably one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. He's very athletic. Like when Derek Carr got injured, I don't know if it was this season or the season prior, but when Derek Carr went out, Mariota filled in. He did a pretty good job. So Mariota is a very, very talented quarterback, and especially in like this wide zone scheme, get some bootlegs, give him some nakeds where he just takes it himself. It would be a good backup to have. Him and Tua have a good relationship, so that helps. And I'm sure over the course of his career, he's just continued to learn more about the game, so he'd be a good veteran presence as well for Tua, and they can relate on obviously their history and whatnot. The next guy, he seems to be, he usually goes team to team every year, is Tyrod Taylor. Once again, not a great starting quarterback, but as a backup, he can fill in and be competent and do a good job. So kind of similar mold to Mariota in terms of athleticism. You get him on those bootlegs and move the pocket with him, and his legs are also a threat. Obviously, these guys aren't as accurate of passers, but I think if Tua were to go down, they'd be able to fill in and not be terrible, and older veteran leadership guys. Now, this third guy, he's probably going to be the most in-demand backup, and it's Mr. Trubisky. Him and Tua have pretty similar skill sets. Trubisky might be a little faster. Tua is probably more accurate, but in terms of similar positions, top pick, getting a lot of flack, yada, 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 he's a very good backup quarterback. Thing is, I think he's just going to cost too much money for that you would want to put into a backup. Like, you look, we spent $5 million on Brissett last year. That was a horrible signing. Like, you look at some other backups that were getting paid way less, like $2.5 million less, which is like a veteran starter. Not starter, but a veteran, like a solid vet. And they just spent too much money on the back, in my opinion, especially when you consider the level of play we got from Jacoby. He might have better success in different kind of offenses, but the one that we were running, it just wasn't smart. So I think Trubisky is going to cost too much money, but if he's not, then why not? He's a solid backup. He's not necessarily a full-blown vet, but I'm sure he's learned enough of the game to help teach as well. Next guy, kind of similar lane as Trubisky, where I think he's probably going to be too expensive, but Teddy Bridgewater. He'd be a very good vet. He'd fill in and not be a liability. I think he'd probably be too expensive. He was a starter this season, and he wasn't terrible. He wasn't good, but he's a good stopgap, especially for a team that needs a quarterback. And then the last guy on this list, I don't think he'll come back. I don't think we'll want him to come back, but just for the sake of the video and for the sake of the human being, I have Fitzmagic down here. Obviously, there's a relationship to Miami. I think Fitz is going to want to compete for a job. He knows if he comes to Miami, he's not going to get a shot to compete. But he would be a great leadership presence. He's just a great dude. I'd love to see him back for the Dolphins. I don't see it happening, though. So that wraps up the quarterbacks. Like I said, my top guy is Mariota. I just want someone with vet experience that if Tua were to go down, or we just want to I don't know. Yeah, basically, if Tua were to go down, they wouldn't be a liability, and they're a good leadership presence. So that's it for quarterbacks. Going to running backs, there's a very, very common theme with every single one of these running backs aside from like 2. So I have Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Matt Breida, Jarek McKinnon. You can see the theme there. And then Philip Lindsay, and then Rashad Penny. I don't even know why I put Rashad Penny here. He had a baller back half of the season. But, I mean, shit, yeah. I mean, if he's not too expensive, he's a good running back. I mean, he showed it towards the back half of the season. I don't know if he necessarily fits what we're going to be trying to do. I think he's more of a bigger guy. But, I mean, we do kind of need a bigger back as well. So maybe we go ahead and sneak get him. But I think some of the guys that I listed earlier, the former Niner running backs, is what we'll go after. I think there's some people projecting the Dolphins to go spend top money on a Fournette or a second-round pick on like Kenneth Walker. I don't think that's what the Dolphins are going to do. You just look at the history of this scheme. You usually find these guys late and cheap. So that's why I think they go out and get a vet who understands the scheme, can help teach it, and maybe take the lead snaps for a little bit until they find the true guy that they want to give the ball to the most. That's why I think Mostert, Wilson, Breida, or McKinnon make the most sense. I don't know if but Philip Lindsay too. He ran the scheme in the Denver when he was like a 1,000-yard rusher 2 years in a row. So I could see us bringing back Lindsay as well. I honestly see us getting 2 of these guys on cheap contracts, and then one, like, I don't think they'll both make the roster, but between what we have in-house, a cheap free agent signing, and like a late draft pick, I think that's where we'll go for our running back room. And you guys might be concerned by that, but I think the scheme and the blocking is what elevates these guys, not necessarily the specific runner. Obviously, the better the runner, the better the scheme is. I just don't think that's what they'll target right away. My biggest takeaway, we need someone fast, one cut, take it to the crib. But we do need, I think, a bigger back, short yardage situation as well, which we don't currently have on the roster. So that's it for running backs. The top guys I'm looking for, Lindsay, and then really like the former 49ers guy, they're all interchangeable. Mostert would be the top guy, especially if he's cheap for like $2 million. I would take it. Fullbacks. I want a fullback. I don't see it happening. We already signed a fullback, and they might be good with him. But I see us having like a kind of a camp battle at fullback. But I have Alec Ingold, the Raiders fullback. He's a very good fullback. He's a utility guy too. He can catch the ball. He can block. So it would be someone that if he does hit the open market and doesn't get re-signed prior to free agency, I could see us going after him. So that's it for running backs and fullbacks. So we just have receivers and tight ends to go. So the thing, it's hard to get a gauge on the scheme necessarily because a lot of what's going to happen prior to free agency will be telling. First and foremost, the Dolphins need to re-sign Matt Collins. Not only a great locker room dude, when he was in the game, he was very productive, and he's a phenomenal special teamer. He's not going to be expensive. There's no excuse to not bring Matt Collins back. So he's someone that could actually maybe sneak in, get some snaps, but I have it broken down into tiers in terms of the receivers the Dolphins could look to get. When making this list, I was looking for something that might not necessarily be what we're looking for. I think there's a balance. I think they're going to be looking for what I'm about to say, but they're also potentially looking for something else, and I'll mention that. So when I was making this list, my perception was I think the Dolphins are going to look for a big outside guy to help body people up and help create space underneath for Waddle, and run block, be a good, big, solid run blocker. So that's kind of what this list follows. However, I think they could be also looking for just guys that when you put the ball in their hands, they could crib it. But I don't think your entire receiving core can be made up of guys like that. So that's why this list is primarily big outside receivers. So without further ado, my top tier, there's one player in it, Allen Robinson. I'm sure you guys have seen PFF mocking him to us. I don't really see it happening, especially for the potential price tag. I don't personally want to pay that kind of money for Allen Robinson. He's a great player, but there's some durability issues. He's kind of a lack of a separation kind of guy, but he's still a good player. But yeah, his lack of separation, his durability, and probably the contract he's going to get paid, I'm kind of out on it. But maybe we do it. I don't see it happening though. So my upper middle guys, I have DJ Chark and Michael Gallup. Even calling upper middle for Chark might be a little gracious. He's my top guy on this list. I'm a big fan of him. He's extremely athletic. He's big. He's kind of exactly what we're looking for. But he's like a 4-3 kind of guy. Not late 4-3s. He's coming off an injury. He shouldn't be too expensive too. So that's why he's my favorite guy. But then we have Michael Gallup. Similar situation, coming off injury. He's a very good player, and he'd be a solid outside guy. I think Dallas are going to try and lock him up. My middle tier, I have Allen Lazard, MVS, both Green Bay Packers, and then Zach Pascal for the Colts. Once again, these guys all follow kind of a similar frame of big guys that can stick their nose in the run game and provide some upside as receivers. Towards the bottom, the middle and lower tiers, what I'm saying, like, these guys aren't necessarily going to be a 1 or 2 guy, but they'll be complementary 3. But like I said, Chark is my favorite just because he really he's a great receiver. He just needs to be more consistent. But Lazard and MVS are both big dudes. You see them in Green Bay. They're not great, but they get it done, and they're both big bodies. And Zach Pascal is very similar. He's a very good run blocker, and he catches a lot of touchdowns. But once again, these guys aren't necessarily separators, so it's hard to differentiate some of this stuff, especially with what they're specifically looking for. I see the Dolphins likely signing like a middle of the pack receiver and then going out and getting someone in the draft as well. I think that's where they'll look, especially this receivers class in the draft is phenomenal. So I think that's more of so what they'll be looking. So I could see them maybe like signing at the highest of tiers, like a DJ Chark, which I would love, or as low as like someone like MVS, Lazard, Zach Pascal. But for my lower tier, which is, once again, these are going to be like depth guys, fight for a roster spot kind of guys, Traquan Smith, Josh Reynolds, Mohamed Sanu, Albert Wilson. So Traquan, kind of similar thing. I was just going through free agents, taking things that I saw. He was just kind of a bigger body. I know the name, someone I threw in there. Josh Reynolds, he's been on the Rams, a similar kind of scheme. That's kind of why I put him here. He wouldn't be expensive. Mohamed Sanu, obviously, connection with the Falcons and Niners. So I can see him, bring him in cheap, let him teach, see what happens from there, see if he makes the roster. And then Albert Wilson. I have Albert Wilson here. I don't know how some Dolphins fans are mixed feelings on Wilson. He's a solid player. He's not someone you want to rely on, but he's also good after the catch, sometimes bad after the catch. So he's someone that maybe they'll look to bring back on a cheap contract that's cuttable so that if he doesn't make the roster in camp, it doesn't hurt you. I don't see why not bring him back on a cheap deal that won't cost you if you cut him. Especially for, like I said, they like run after the catch in this offense, and he kind of fits that bill. So that's why I have him here. And then last position, I know it's kind of a lengthy video. I appreciate if you're still watching. Comment down below if you are. Tight end. So this is kind of dependent on what's going to happen within the next 2 weeks. Do we resign Gesicki and Smythe? Do we not? I'm getting a feeling we're not probably going to bring him back, whether we tag and trade Gesicki or not, / Smythe. I think Smythe's gone. His receiving was more schemed up, and his blocking is not at the level it should have been for what he is. I see Smythe not coming back, unfortunately. I love Smythe. I would like to bring him back, but that's how I see it happening. Gesicki, I think, has a chance. He's a very good receiver, especially when I was looking at these free agents. I'm like, man, I thought some of these guys were better receivers than they really were, but they weren't. So this is if we don't bring back Gesicki or Smythe, which is unfortunately what I see happening. So if they're not high on Hunter Long and are looking for an immediate starting tight end for the next couple of years, I think the number one priority is Dalton Schultz. He's far and away the best tight end in free agency, including Gesicki, if you consider Gesicki a tight end. He's one of the best blockers at the position, period, and he was one of the best receivers. Now, granted, his receiving, he came in a high-powered offense where the attention wasn't going to him like the way it probably was for Gesicki. But with that said, he put up phenomenal numbers, I think, better than Gesicki. Once again, like I said, offense does play a role in that, but he's a complete tight end. He's someone that's going to play in line, not in slot all the time. He's going to block his ass off, and he's a very, very good player in the receiving game as well. So if we let Gesicki walk, I think this is the number one guy to go after. And then after Schultz, I really just have two names. I didn't do too much. It's hard. I don't like using PFF grades. I think they're trash for the most part. But it's hard for me to quantify run blocking without going in watching the film, and I just didn't do that. So the two last names I got, David Njoku. He's a free agent. I don't think he'll be overly expensive, probably like $5-6 million range. I don't know. I don't fully know, but it's probably somewhere in that range. He's a solid overall tight end. He can block, he can receive. He doesn't do either one overly phenomenal, but he's a solid, complete guy. So, like, if they feel high on Hunter Long, this is a guy I would recommend maybe bringing in, having him compete, have him take snaps, and if you run 12 personnel, he will be a very good player. And then the last guy is CJ Uzama. You saw him with the Bengals. Great locker room guy, great blocker. I feel like this is a guy that the Bengals no-brain bring back just because of the connection he had with the rest of those guys. They all love him. So I don't really see him hitting free agency, but if he were to, he's a solid blocker. Once again, good depth piece. Have him compete and bring the best out of Hunter Long as well. But hopefully it's either Gesicki or Hunter Long develops or Dalton Schultz. That's the best case scenario for this position. Especially it's very important in this offense to have a good tight end to help block, which Gesicki isn't, but who knows what happens. So next video is going to be offensive line. Make sure you tune in for that. If you have any suggestions, drop them down below. Let me know how you felt about this, who you want us to get, who you don't. Do you disagree? Do you agree? I appreciate you guys for watching. I really do. And until next time, I'll catch you guys.